So bringing us home today is Resouro Strategic Metals, ASX RAU, with a market capitalization of around $39 million. Presenting today is Chris Eager, the CEO, Principal, and the Director. Resouro Strategic Metals is developing the world-class rare earth elements, titanium, and gold deposits in prime Brazilian mining districts. Chris, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's great to be here. Can we have the next slide just pass through the disclaimers? Okay, we'll start with the huge announcement that we made a couple of weeks ago. We were listed on the TSXV in 2022, and unfortunately, as a lot of people in Australia know, that the market's been very difficult there. So we decided at the beginning of 2023 to do a secondary listing on the Australian Stock Exchange, which we completed on the 14th of June. So we did 3 intermediary capital raisings before the IPO, which funded our drill program to drill out the Tyros titanium and rare earths project. Now, this has always been, we always knew it is an immense project. It's located just to the north of Belo Horizonte, northwest of Belo Horizonte, the capital city of Minas Gerais. Minas Gerais is a mining state, and the name actually means general mines. And it's a great place to be developing a project. But this project is quite special in that it is immense. We have 450 square kilometres of concessions. The ore body extends over 71 kilometres, and no matter where we drill and where we map this ore body, we get the same thickness. It's about 40 metres thick, and the same grade profile. So there were 21 historic drill holes before we started with the project, and we drilled 103 drill holes, and they're drill holes from surface. This is an ore body which is 40 metres thick and is either at surface or near surface. So for a relatively small amount of drilling, in about 7% of the project, we've defined a measured, indicated, and inferred maiden resource of 1.7 billion tonnes. But the interesting part is that the measured and indicated portion is 1 billion tonnes at just over 4,000 ppm total rare earth oxides and 12% titanium dioxide. And this makes the project very unique. We've got 2 minerals and 2 potential revenue streams that occur in a 1-to-1 correlation. And it's just a freak of nature that the magmatic source for this big, extensive volcanoclastic layer had a lot of titanium in it, as well as rare earths. So next slide, please. So the area that we have is about 450 square kilometres. It's located just to the north of Belo Horizonte. It's in a very good location in terms of development, and we're going through a PEA process now. Next slide, please. So we've done extensive geological work on the central block of Tyros, which makes up about 7% of the area that's been mapped in the formation, which is called the Capacete Formation. We've now completed our first test work with a group called Altinium, which has a proprietary rare earth and titanium leaching process, and we've got very good results. I'll speak a bit about that later. The jurisdiction, as the previous speaker mentioned, that's extremely important. Minas Gerais has some very large mines operating, obviously very large iron ore mines, but we're very close to Araxá, which is the CBMM mine, which produces about 90% or more of the world's niobium. So next slide, please. Okay, just a bit more detail on the resource. The important thing about the resource is that this is a very homogeneous layer, so it doesn't require a lot of drilling to drill for measured and indicated. Indicated is on a 250 meter grid spacing. What's very interesting about the resource is that we have 120 million tonnes at around 23% titanium dioxide and 9,000 ppm total rare earth oxides. Now, a typical project in Brazil or elsewhere that's in a clay style, which is similar to ours, can then have anything from 1,000 to 2,600 ppm as a resource grade. We have 9,000 ppm. And the titanium dioxide, if you look at a typical beach sands type project, the TiO2 grade in those, you're lucky if you have 1 or 2%, and we have 23%. So I think in terms of the tonnage and grade of this deposit, if it was purely a rare earths project, it's a top tier project in terms of tonnage and grade. If it was purely a titanium project, it would be probably the largest TiO2 project in the world in terms of in situ TiO2. Next slide, please. So I actually will skip over this slide because that's great. And also skip over this slide. Just going back to location, it's a wonderful location. We have 3 towns within commuting distance of each of these blocks. The block in the middle, which is the central block, is where we drilled and got the 1.7 billion tonne resource. So you can see we've got a huge land holding apart from that area. To the north, we've got our northern blocks. We've done some drilling there, and we're getting very similar thicknesses and grades, about 40 metres thick at similar grades, 15 kilometres north. 35 kilometres south, we've drilled. We're getting very similar thicknesses and grades. So that's just an indication of the size. But as you see from this map, we've got 2 500 kVA power lines going through the project. And they're driven by hydropower. Most of Brazil is run on hydropower. We have highways. We have a railway line which goes to any one of 5 different deep water ports with bulk materials handling facilities. So we're in an extremely good location in terms of infrastructure, highways, rail, power. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, just one back. Okay, in terms of the resource, you can see we've just drilled extensively in the central block to produce our 1.7 billion tonne resource. And at the moment, we've remobilised a drill rig to do infill drilling in the areas where we're going to do the initial mine planning. So we've got an extremely large resource, so we can select, and one of the big benefits of the project is we can select areas where there's no or very little stripping ratio, that this area is flat cattle grazing land. So we select areas which have very minimal environmental impact. And the nice thing about the project is that it's quite fragmented in terms of landowners, but the vast majority of landowners are very positive towards mining because they get to share part of the government royalty when you put a mine into production. So we're finding great community support. And in general, Brazil, I've done a lot of work in Peru and Chile, and compared to Peru and Chile, Brazil tends to be pro-mining, apart from in environmentally sensitive areas like the Atlantic forest or the Amazon forest. We're a long way from there, so we don't have any issues there. Next slide, please. I'll skip through. This is just more on the resource. You can see the grade tonnage curve is very flat. We don't have a cutoff grade. All our grades are high grades, so we haven't drilled any low-grade drill holes. That goes to the continuity of this resource, because it's this very thick volcanoclastic layer that's been mixed and transported over 71 kilometres. It means that virtually every drill hole has the same grade profile. Next slide, please. And what we're finding also is that we have the high-grade domain, which is the 120 million tonnes at 9,000 ppm total rare earth oxides and 23% titanium dioxide. This occurs as a zone at or near the surface. So it provides us an opportunity to mine high-grade ore and just target high-grade ore, or decide to go for large-scale bulk mining, where we would take what is still high-grade but not ultra-high-grade. Next slide, please. And actually, it's just a little bit more about the resource. You'll see that the grades are skewed for NdPr and total rare earth oxides and TiO2 towards the high grade. Next slide, please. This is just a demonstration of the fact that the TiO2 grades and the rare earth grades occur almost in one-to-one correlation. So next slide, please. And also the vast majority of the samples that we've taken are well above the cutoff grade. Next slide, please. This is quite important in demonstrating, obviously the vertical scale's been exaggerated, but you have this red layer, which is the 120 million tonnes at ultra-high grades. So the type of deposit it is, it's clay-like material, it's friable, it's free digging, it's near or at surface. So this is akin to having, a multi-billion tonne copper ore body at surface, free digging with a copper equivalent grade of around 4 or 5%. So next slide, please. So this is our next stage. We're doing our reserve infill drilling to do mine planning. So now we've appointed Ausenco to lead our preliminary economic assessment. We've appointed the environmental consultants to do the environmental impact assessment. We've employed the mining engineers to do the mine planning. So the good thing about working in Brazil is that there's a lot of good professional organizations. Ausenco, for example, has a big office in Belo Horizonte and tremendous experience in leaching rare earths and also building operations in Brazil and Latin America. Next slide, please. So we've announced the results from the Altinium metallurgical test work, and for magnet rare earth oxides, NdPr plus the heavies, there is a protocol that Altinium have used, which has enabled them to achieve plus 90% recoveries. We're also doing metallurgical test work with CIT Senai. The only sort of reference that we have for leaching rare earths really is Chinese leaching. And we know that the Chinese use a whole variety of different reagents to leach rare earths, including citric acid, salt, various different acids. So we're testing a whole lot of various different acids and alkaline solutions to see which gives us the best recoveries. So we're doing cost-benefit analysis on the Altinium process, which we know gives plus 90% recoveries, various other reagents. We've also sent 300 individual samples for metallurgical test work at SGS. And this is to determine what parts of our ore body would be applicable to ammonium sulfate leaching, which seems to be in the Brazilian market what people expect to use. But it's only one reagent, and it's possibly not the one we're going to be using. So we're testing multiple reagents, and we should be coming out with announcements on that soon. So we know we can leach the rare earths, and the big benefit of the Altinium process is it leaches all of the rare earths out of the material and leaves a residue of titanium dioxide, but very clean titanium dioxide. And the value of TiO2 is really linked to the deleterious elements, and the rare earths would be considered deleterious elements in the titanium dioxide. So it's all leached out, provides a nice clean titanium dioxide product. The other byproducts from that process is high purity silica, and we've been contacted by a few potential buyers for that high quality silica and hematite, but hematite is obviously probably not an interesting product to sell. Next slide, please. So we're doing work, as I said, with CIT Senai, and we've reported the initial site test work from Altinium, both very positive results. And one of the catalysts for news flow coming up will be more test work from CIT Senai and SGS on various different leaching methods. Next slide, please. So we're moving ahead really fast with the PEA. We're also moving ahead really fast with mine permitting. Brazil instituted the new Department of Mines about 3 years ago and streamlined the permitting process. And also Brazil, and particularly Minas Gerais, is very pro-mining, and you can go through the permitting process very quickly. So we're doing three things in parallel, speaking to off-takers and potential buyers for titanium dioxide and rare earth elements, mine planning and permitting, and the PEA. So we're well advanced with the PEA now. Next slide, please. So we've developed this acronym, corporate responsibility and ethical compliance, rather than ESG, because ESG has had a bad rap lately. We have Anne Laundrie, who's our director. She's a CFA and an MBA and was a very senior fund manager in Canada. And she's overseeing our ESG initiatives and environmental and social programs. We have a dedicated lady who's a psychologist who works with the local farmers and makes sure that there's no discontent about any of our activities. As I said previously, this is a very benign area in terms of it's cattle grazing land, and the people in general are interested in jobs, work. So when, hopefully we won't have any negative attitude towards the project. And if we do, we've got people on the ground who would counsel various people if that did arise. So that's our sort of ground up approach to ESG. Next slide, please. So we also have a very tight capital structure. About 70% of the capital of the company is held by management, principally me, and about 5 investment funds, including one family office. So one of the differentiators with this project is that we acquired it very cheaply. We've got no payments pending for the project, and we were able to do that because this is a project which I'd been working on for about 5 years before we put it into the Resouro to raise money. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about my background. I'm a mining engineer from Australia. I worked in Ecuador after I graduated. So most of my career has been in Latin America. I've been involved in 3 major bankable feasibility studies, including a 1.3 billion tonne copper porphyry project in Peru. So going through a bankable feasibility study for Tyros is my sweet spot. I have an MBA and I've worked in banking for mining project finance, and was the founder and CEO of 3 companies that did very well on the market. I spoke about Anne Laundry. We're just going to appoint a new director who has tremendous experience in developing projects of this scale in industrial minerals, but I can't speak too much about that. We'll make an announcement soon. Next slide, please. So in terms of the market, everyone is aware of the fundamentals behind the rare earths market. The fact is we're trying to displace production from China, and the Western world is very keen on diversifying supply. And also the rare earths market is in around a 6 or 7% compound annual growth. So there's enough room for quite a few new rare earths projects to come on to fill that supply and displace some production from elsewhere. On the titanium dioxide, we've been flooded since we put the resource calculation out, flooded with inquiries from industrial groups who are interested in buying the titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide market is very tight at the moment. Just on the basic uses, which is paper, plastic fillers, and paint, there's about a 6% or 7% compound annual growth rate. But then there's a whole lot of new technologies for titanium dioxide. So it's a very interesting market that I think the equities market will start to appreciate soon. Next slide, please. Okay. From an investor point of view, there's some very good reasons why you would buy Resouro right now. We have a massive high-grade resource. There's nothing like it that I've seen in my 30-year career. It's got great infrastructure. It's in a mining-friendly location, and it can be taken from where we are at the moment to development very quickly. Titanium and rare earths are both in growth markets, and there'll be a very tight market in both commodities for quite some time. We've got a very clear path for building fundamental value going through the PEA, the PFS, the DFS, and we've got a lot of good announcements coming out in terms of technical studies that we're doing at the moment, and also very soon the initial mineable reserves and the PEA, which will allow people to wrap numbers around the size. But if you look at the in situ value, just the 1.7 billion tonnes at 3,900 ppm total rare earth oxides and 12% titanium dioxide, it's got a tremendous in situ value. And our market cap is only about 32 million Canadian, 39 million Aussie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for the presentation. We do have a few questions come through. The first is relating to funding. How supportive has the Brazilian government and also other relevant regulators been to this point?
Oh, great! Actually, I was in Belo Horizonte last week, and we had discussions with Investminas. There are two funds in Brazil which provide assistance for these projects, and we're going through that process at the moment. Our test work at CIT Senai is being subsidised by the Brazilian government, where we've got two groups in Germany who are helping with European grant funding for the project. We've got one in group that we're going to mandate in the Netherlands. There's a lot. Germany, Italy, and France have all set aside over €1 billion funds to secure strategic metals. So that's an interesting one. We had a very warm reception in Washington, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, the Department of Foreign Capital. All the major departments have money related to the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're working on grant funding. We're also we raised 8 million Aussie dollars at the IPO. But we're also looking at asset sales to generate more. So we don't need to go back to the market. We will make a lot of progress with the project. And we're very happy with the support out of Australia. We've got 4 major funds who are principal investors. We've got a couple of international funds, and we've got a couple of very strong family offices. So our issue at the moment is we need to generate more retail investors and that's one of the reasons I attribute to our market cap only being 32 or 39 million Australian dollars. But we're working on getting the message out, and thank you very much for this opportunity to.
That's why we're here.
Yes.
Perfect. So can I ask you a technical question? Can you please discuss the key issues to be addressed in the separation of titanium dioxide and rare earth elements or the products, if necessary, if there is any?
There's 2 ways of looking at it. One is the rare earth elements are in clay, so they're in the very fine fraction. So one school of thought is to separate the clay-like material from the slightly coarser. It's still not coarse. It's around 75 plus microns where the titanium dioxide is, and then do conventional separation and concentration of titanium dioxide and conventional leaching of the rare earths. But the interesting thing about the Altinium process is that you leach the whole package, and the residual is the titanium dioxide. So you take 90% of the magnet rare earths out of it, and a whole lot of the other elements like niobium, for example, but there's a lot of other saleable elements that come up with the rare earths. And then you're left with this residual, which is titanium dioxide that's been cleaned by the leaching process. You've got the high purity silica, which is a saleable product, and hematite. So this is all the test work we're doing at CIT Senai, and we're taking the next steps with Altinium. And we're also doing this ammonium sulfate ore categorization sort of leach test work, but I don't believe that will be the most economic option, but we don't know that yet.
And Chris, just to finish up, why have you chosen a dual listing strategy? What, if any, have you seen any benefits in this?
Yes, absolutely. I was at the PDAC in 2023, and we had just vended Tyros into Resouro. I did the rounds. We got a lot of interest from fund managers, but universally they said, I can't buy it because the stock is totally illiquid on the TSXV, and I would never be able to sell it again. And then I visited New York and an Australian broker there, and he said, go to Australia. So I went there, and within a day, I was oversubscribed on the first capital raising. We did 3 capital raisings pre-IPO, 3 additional ones. And the Australian investors, particularly the educated institutional investors, just get rare earths, and they do appreciate Brazil. In Canada, they haven't had any success stories with rare earths. So it was a really hard sell. And unfortunately, the market, there's a few structural issues in the market. Firstly, a lot of speculative money got taken out of the market when everyone lost their money on cannabis. There's not many small brokers left. And one of the great things in Australia is all the brokers work together. It doesn't matter whether one's got a mandate, everyone sees a good opportunity. And we've got a lot of stockbrokers who took part of our IPO placement and the pre-IPO placements, PA. So that's a refreshing thing. In Canada, it's very hard to get any broker interested in a resource stock at the moment. And also the Canadians are all investing in the US. They're all buying in NVIDIA and, the easy tech stocks. So there's no speculative money to be had there. So Australia was a breath of fresh air when we went to Australia, and got a great reception.
Chris, thank you. We look forward to hearing your story progress over time.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chris.